Hello and welcome to week 5 of Advanced Qualitative and Quantitative Research Methods with Communities. I am delighted to be talking to you about data analysis and the different aspects that are connected to it, or some of the different aspects. So translation, transcription, and different strategies for rigor. So today I'm going to talk about translation in qualitative research, transcribing and related issues, rigor in quantitative research, and strategies for rigor in qualitative research. Translation and transcription is a topic that you wouldn't think would be very exciting, but I promise you it's more exciting than you think, and more important than you may think as well. So when you are doing translation of research materials or of your final research product, you need to pay careful attention to how you do that translation. So sometimes you may be researching populations that don't speak English. And so you may need to use the services of a translator to translate even recruitment materials. And there's a common misconception that translation is a value neutral process, and that any bilingual person can translate effectively, or maybe even that Google Translate can translate effectively. However, this is definitely a misconception. The translator holds a really important position in the process of creating materials that are effective and that help the researchers to actually access the ideas and experiences of participants. So there are so many different nuances within language. So if you've ever had to learn a new language, and I apologize for the dog who is very excited. Maddie, quiet, please. All right, sorry about that. As you can see, there are two dogs. Hey, no, Maddie, thank you. Thank you. Maybe I'm going to amuse Maddie with my little puppet. So I got this fantastic puppet for Christmas from my husband in my stocking. It is made of recycled sweaters. And I'm going to call him Boss Bunny. And I thought he might amuse possibly you and or my puppies while I am working. So if I was going to try to translate something into from English into Bunny, it would be a challenging thing, because when I have had to learn other languages and try to communicate in other languages, the things that are difficult are the things that we take for granted when we know a language. If you've learned another language, you know that jokes are just about the last thing that you can understand, or that you can actually use in a language. And so one of the things that translators do is that they also have to take a very careful look at their subject locations, because that plays a very important role in the translation process and needs to be taken into account in the research process. And so if you have a translator who is translating and has never encountered the nuances, maybe even of language among the research participants, that translator has to learn that before doing the translation. So translators need to actively engage in interpretive activities beyond language exchange when they make decisions on how to ask questions or what to probe during an interview. And in a few minutes, we're going to talk about how you can have rigor with translation. All right. I think Boss Bunny is going to take a break for a moment. And mostly because I need my hand to forward the slide. So translators need to be recognized as important members of the research team, and they need to be included in the discussions of the research methodology. So it's important for the research team to develop an understanding of what has been changed, gained, or lost through the process of translation. And readers need to think of ways in which cross-cultural research can be done most effectively, despite limited resources. And there is very rarely money in research budgets to do translation, but there are ways around it. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as I talk about rigor in this type of research. So transcription. Now, I don't think anyone has ever said, oh my gosh, I love doing transcription. What about you, Boss Bunny? Do you like doing transcription? It's terrible. So transcription is really a really important way of recording the process of interviews. So traditionally, qualitative researchers took notes during interviews and they wrote up the notes after the interview is over. I even do that now, even though, so I think I was trained in that traditional qualitative research. That was before the days of lots of recorders. But nowadays, most interviews are audio recorded and then transcribed by the researcher. And transcription is a time-consuming process. I actually put myself through my master's degree doing transcriptions for other people, and I got really good at it, and still I don't think I was making very much per hour based on the transcription. So transcription is incredibly important, but also is not fun to do because you are listening carefully. Sometimes transcription and translation come in together, and you need to continue to have conversations about how the words are produced, how you are indicating when there are things like a pause. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but something miraculous happened just as COVID was happening, and that was transcription software, for example, Otter AI. And that makes transcription much easier. So you can take an audio file or a video file and you can feed it into Otter AI, which is a free service, or you can record while a participant is recording and record the text while you're interviewing. And it makes transcription much easier, but I'm going to tell you a few pros and cons of it as well. So transcription software, the advantage is that it really does save time and effort. And for Xana and I, when we were working on a recent research project, having always done transcriptions and always hired students for transcriptions, it's a really great way to know the material. But the limitation is that this transcription software often doesn't accurately capture words, accents, or background noise. AI is a responsive transcription software, and still accents are difficult for it. And so you still need to go over the transcription output to ensure that the conversation has been captured accurately. And so this means that, in fact, you need to be reading everything that happened and correcting words that are incorrect, words that get missed. And so it's something that you need to do very, very soon after you do get the output from the transcription software. And one of the things that I found, however, whether you're doing traditional transcription or using transcription software, sorry about that, is that you really get to know the material. So most of the time, I've done my own transcription for interviews. Only in the last couple of years, where I had the opportunity to hire students, did I have I moved to letting someone else do the transcriptions for my research? And I found that there was a very big difference in when I did the transcriptions myself or checked transcriptions with transcription software, because in the process of transcribing, my brain was doing some automatically doing some analysis and thinking, oh yeah, I need to remember that this person said that. And so when it came time to do the data analysis, if I was really familiar with the interviews, the process of analysis was much easier. So rigor. What exactly is rigor? So rigor in quantitative research, whether it's in quantitative or qualitative, it refers to the quality of the research process. And the more rigorous the research, the more trustworthy the study results. And so there's always a section looking at methodology, which is actually the process or the research process. How did you approach it? What did you do? And I'm always really excited when I'm reading a research study when I see that they have been very rigorous in the way that they did their research. So they've looked at the validity and reliability of the study. So looked at, are we measuring what we intend to measure? And does the same measurement process yield the same results each time? I'm happy to see when, as part of the methodology, they talked about how they had to shift things because they were responding to the validity and the reliability. Validity actually refers to whether or not the variable accurately represents or measures the concept that we're interested in. This is something that you talked about in the first semester. It's also about how well an idea of reality fits within reality. Interesting. Validity is also concerned with the proper use of procedures and the generalizability of the findings outside the study. So if someone was to look at your study, could they replicate it in a different context? And if they could replicate it, would they get the same results or similar results? And oftentimes there's no one variable that adequately measures a concept, and research have to use the variable that's least inadequate to represent the concept. For example, so lots of different variables exist within the concept of social class, but in order to identify where someone might fall in terms of their economic status, income would be the variable that we would use to represent social class, though we recognize that there are many more things, many more variables that exist to identify social class. Reliability refers to the dependability of the measurement instrument. So reliability is actually concerned with the questions of stability and consistency. And it does the same measurements. So what they're asking is, does the same measurement tool yield stable and consistent results when repeated over time? And that's once again, so if you are using a survey or a questionnaire, if you were to use that measurement tool, is that measurement tool accurate? Is it something that holds up over time? Can it be repeated? Can it be repeated many times? Has it taken into consideration every place in which it might be used? And will it yield the same results? There are a number of different types of reliability. So there's test and retest reliability. So does the same test consistently yield the same result? There's inter-item reliability. So are multiple items measuring the same concept consistent with each other? And there is inter-observer reliability. So do multiple researchers using the same measure get equivalent results? There are actually 4 ways to improve reliability in quantitative research. So you want to clearly conceptualize all constructs. And so this is where design is really important. So you want to really think through before you construct your tools, before you construct and design your research. What do you want to achieve in the end, and work backwards from that. So increase the levels of measurement. For example, choose a ratio level instead of an ordinal level of measure, and use multiple indicators of a variable. So use pre-tests or pilot tests and replication. And you'll recognize that term pilot. So pilot test, pilot program, something that you're trying out before you actually send out your research questions to your intended audience. So there are many types of validity. So there is face validity. On the face of it, do you believe that the definition and method of measurement fits? Does it make sense, or does it look about right? Content validity. Does the measure represent all the aspects of the conceptual definition of a construct? And criterion validity. The validity of an indicator is verified by comparing it with another measure of the same construct that is widely accepted. And then, last but not least, construct validity. So the extent to which a measure is actually related to other measures as specified by theory or previous research. When we're thinking about rigor in qualitative research, qualitative researchers typically reject traditional quantitative standards of reliability and validity, though you do see that some researchers do mixed methods. So they're combining both qualitative and quantitative. But there needs to be a good way to evaluate whether research is good or trustworthy. You bet. There's gotta be a way that research is good and trustworthy. Otherwise, why are we even doing it? Thank you, Boss Bunny. I appreciate that. So there are a number of standards by which to evaluate qualitative research. Lincoln and Guba were among the first to develop separate criteria to evaluate naturalistic inquiry and qualitative methods. And these include credibility, so the degree of fit between participants' views and the researchers' descriptions of the same. Transferability, a generalizability of studies' findings. Auditability. So this refers to the dependability of the findings. Are the study procedures well documented and traceable? And that goes back once again to that methodology piece. And then confirmability. The study's findings are firmly linked to data. So you want to ensure that you are drawing directly from the data and that you're not actually only representing your point of view. Often we come into doing research with a particular concept in mind. I think that I'm going to find this, but you've got to be willing to recognize that sometimes the intention that you have in designing a research project, you might have findings that actually might even contradict your original idea, and you need to be willing to be responsive to where the data is going. Generalizability in qualitative research is really different from that that's actually aimed at quantitative research. So in qualitative research, generalizability is seen in terms of how far the findings resonate. So findings can have transferability and resonance without being generalizable in the statistical sense. So when we think about that, can you read a study about violence against women in sub-Saharan Africa and apply it to violence against women in Canada? There may be transferability and resonance, even though there might be very different cultural contexts and the setting might be different. The reaction and the reality of women who experience violence might have transferability and might have resonance with women in Canada. The trustworthiness in qualitative research. So the concept of trustworthiness comes close to capturing rigor and accountability in qualitative research. So a trustworthy study is carried out fairly and ethically, and its findings represent as closely as possible the experiences of participants. But that trustworthiness needs to be demonstrated. And once again, we come back to the data, how you share the data, and not proof texting to get your results, but really drawing from the data that you gather and the story that it's telling. There are a number of threats to trustworthiness. So reactivity, the potentially distorting effects of the researcher's presence on the participants' beliefs and perceptions. And that's what we were taught. So you can see how that might happen if you have a particular, as a researcher, have a particular idea in mind. Researcher bias. Researcher bias, gosh, what do you do with bias, particularly unconscious bias? That's a tricky one, I must say, Bethany. Yeah, I agree with Boss Bunny. The researcher's preconceptions, and we all have it, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and personal observations can cloud their observations and their interpretations. And respondents can have bias as well. So participants may withhold, or they might share incorrect or partial information. Say what? That's crazy talk. Well, it might be crazy talk, but when you're doing an interview, Boss Bunny, here's the thing. Yeah. Here's the thing. Sometimes, depending on the context, you may have participants not trust you to a particular level, and they may withhold or share incorrect or partial information because they don't completely trust the process. This is particularly true when you are working with vulnerable populations, though it could happen anywhere. We had to really look at how we created our space when we were working with women with precarious immigration status, because they were vulnerable in so many ways. And so to actually develop relationships was key to the research that we did. So in terms of looking at an overview of strategies for rigor in qualitative research, you have prolonged engagement. So you are engaging over a long period of time and looking at how changes might happen. Triangulation. So you're looking at maybe different forms of research to validate the research that you're doing. So maybe if you do a survey plus interviews, how are those coming together? And are you finding the same data from both those sources? Peer debriefing and support. So including peers in the research debriefing. One of the things that I've done in a number of studies is to form community advisory boards that are looking at the research and validating whether they think what has been shared by people in the interviews is accurate. Member checking. So if you're doing an interview, this is something that has been incredibly important, is actually for all the research that I've done. And I know that for Xana and I'm sure Christian as well, have engaged in this, that you go back to the people that have participated in the research and check with them when you have a transcript and make sure and ensure they feel comfortable with the material that you're going to go forward with in terms of data. So looking at a negative case, so is there a case that stands out in and even contradicts the research that you're doing, including that in the research to ensure that all voices are included, and doing an audit trail. So ensuring that as you proceed with research, you're able to actually clearly articulate what steps you took to mitigate things like participant or researcher bias. So prolonged engagement can help reduce reactivity and respondent bias, but it can increase researcher bias. And so trusting relationships that are developed over time make withholding information or lying less likely. And having more than one interview is one way to achieve that prolonged engagement. Triangulation. Now, I talked about just a brief example of triangulation, but Denson actually proposed 4 types of triangulation. So theory triangulation, so the use of multiple theories to interpret a certain set of data. Or methodological translation. The researcher used multiple methods of a study to understand a single topic. And that's when I talked about the survey and the interviews together. Observer triangulation. So intersubjective agreement through multiple observers. So you're inviting people to observe and to see the research that you're doing, and asking them what they think about the research findings. And then data triangulation. So the use of more than one data source. And that is really the most common type of triangulation. Peer debriefing and support. So as I talked about, the community advisory board. So a peer research group can help research keep to deadlines and help reduce researcher bias. And a disadvantage is that peer debriefing groups can collectively veer off course by fostering groupthink or becoming hyper critical or intolerant. And so you don't want the peer voice to take the research and the direction of the research that the researchers have identified completely off course and lose the voices of participants in that. Member checking should happen when you're doing translation, should happen when you're doing transcription. And its research is seeking the verification of findings by going back to the participants. And it affirms participants' dignity as research partners and gives them a sense of being more in control. And it changes the power imbalance that is always there and that we need to acknowledge is there between researchers and participants. And member checking can be very different in practice. So standpoints are multiple, they may change over time. And some participants may hastily rubber stamp findings, while others may have second thoughts about what was shared. And that can be added into your data analysis. I don't know about you, but I sometimes think about something differently one day to the next. And sometimes research takes a long time. And so something that someone said a year ago may be really different than how they're thinking today. And they may be able to shape or re-articulate, which adds a richness to the research. You think that member checking is a good idea, Boss Bunny?
Oh, yeah. I think member checking is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Boss Bunny. I agree with you. Member checking is very, very important.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so auditing and audit trail. So once again, you have a spirit of openness and documenting each step that's taken during the data collection and analysis. You don't need this for replication, but it does allow other researchers to verify the findings of your research. And in a negative case analysis, a researcher explores personal biases and becomes more self-reflective. And it gives equitable attention to differing viewpoints and avoids lopsided interpretations. And so including that kind of analysis can be really helpful in deconstructing those biases. There are a number of recommended readings for this week, and it may be, once again, really helpful for you in your own research projects. And of course, we have the references for this week. I will tell you that Maddie and Frida have been very happy to be here and do apologize for the barking at the beginning of this lecture. Boss Bunny was really happy to be here.
Great to see y'all, and I'll see you later. Have a great week.
And thank you, Boss Bunny. And I also wish you a wonderful week. And we all look forward to meeting you in class and to further discussing this important aspect of research.